You and me and all the American taxpayers and the next U.S. president and the one after that are now in the steel business, whether you like it or not, because Donald Trump just negotiated to have the U.S. and the U.S. president have effectively a controlling stake in the takeover of a U.S. steel manufacturer known as U.S. Steel by a Japanese company called Nippon. That $14 billion sale, which had been opposed by Joe Biden, had been opposed by Donald Trump. Now, suddenly, it's back on because Donald Trump and his administration extracted what's called a golden share, giving them governance control over this entity. Now, this is not the only steel manufacturer in America. And if you are the leading steel manufacturer in America, making jobs for Americans and producing steel in America like Nucor or Steel Dynamics, your major competitor now in our capitalist system is the U.S. government. How does that make you feel? And the labor unions are upset as well. I'm Michael Popok. Let's talk about the golden share and our being forced into the steel business when we don't want to be, and undermining capitalism and the unions along the way. So how did this happen? Nippon, a major steel manufacturer in Japan, has wanted to acquire U.S. Steel, used to be called USX, for years. The board negotiated. They've been stuck at number 4. They're about 1/5 the size of a company in the U.S. called Nucor. And they decided they needed to merge their way out of their problems financially. All the jobs, all the steel manufacturing, all of that based basically in Pittsburg, Pennsylvania, home of the Steelers. That's where it comes from. Donald Trump's great new idea, led by his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, was for the government to have a seat at the table. And not just any seat, that they be issued a G for gold, G-class share, which gives them governance rights over 12 or 13 different activities. In other words, they're running the show. Now, Nippon said, well, we really want that steel company, but do we really want to be in business with the U.S. government? They have no choice. In fact, the bargain that they struck from the Trump side to approve the deal, or he wasn't going to approve it, now puts in the hands of any future president the ownership of this share that can never be sold. So he's now handcuffed future generations of presidents who may say, listen, we don't want to be competing with private sector companies like Nucor. Why do I want to compete with Nucor? They're a U.S. company. We're the U.S. government. We're supposed to be promoting industry, not competing with it. In fact, the only time in our history where the U.S. has ever gotten involved with owning something like a business against competitors who are U.S. citizens and U.S. workers is in a financial crisis, like the auto bailout, where the government gave billions of dollars to General Motors and took an ownership stake until it was paid back. We just got out of that ownership stake about 3 or 4 years ago. Same thing with banks. When we've had a bailout and used taxpayer dollars, sure, we've taken a stake, an equity stake, a return on our investment guaranteed, and just in case we had to take over the company. But that's in a financial crisis. What's the financial crisis now? So the government just bailed out a private sector entity against its U.S. competitors, joining forces with Japan. Now we're in business with Japan effectively against a U.S. company called Nucor, another U.S. company called Steel Dynamics, and the rest. How do you think they feel right now, knowing that their competitor, U.S. Steel, is not only owned by Japan, but they're now competing directly against the U.S. government? And you know this Trump administration, and they know this Trump administration. If they get sideways with the Trump administration, suddenly you're going to have inspectors and regulators and all sorts of things to try to crush the competition, because now the U.S. is in business against its competitors, the competitors in the steel business. I would get cold sweats every night sleeping if I owned a competitor U.S. steel company against U.S. Steel, now owned in part by the U.S. government, who also controls all of the safety regulations and OSHA and government regulations. And you know they're going to favor U.S. Steel over Nucor because they own a piece of it. They own a controlling interest in it, if you will, when it comes to administrative. But the worst part of this deal is while they can control it, who they hire, who they fire, where their headquarters is going to be, whether they're going to export jobs and import jobs. Yeah, they'll have a say at the table related to that and veto power, but they don't get any of the upside. So we don't get a return on our investment. We don't get money. We just get stuck running a steel company against America, against Americans' interest. Now they're spinning this as it's the art of the deal. See what we did? Other countries own stakes in companies. Brazil owns Embraer, the airline, and China owns TikTok. By the way, this is a roadmap and a blueprint what they're going to try to do with TikTok. They're going to try to say TikTok can be still owned by the Chinese, but we're going to go into business with the Chinese. We're going to own the golden share. Yay! Like the golden unicorn. And we're going to be able to control what they do or they don't do. And then they're going to be in business in America when everything's better now, right? As the Chinese Communist Party continues to suck data and information away from TikTok users and use it against them for artificial intelligence reasons and other reasons. This is bad business. The Steel Workers Union has come out and is livid that Donald Trump would go into business with Japan over American interests. And all he extracted was, well, they're going to keep the jobs here. Okay, they were going to keep the jobs here anyway, especially with the tariff, the steel tariff, to try to avoid the steel tariff. They were going to make as much steel as possible in the U.S. They did not have to do this deal. You did not have to start competing against your own U.S. companies. And what kind of incentive are you sending out to the rest of America and to the entrepreneur class? Build up, fail, succeed, make money. And one day, your major competitor might be the U.S. government. Terrible precedent. I know they're patting themselves on the back over the Commerce Department. I know the people over there. I know they're excited. This is a terrible model for America, and we will rue the day. And as soon as we take back the White House, and as soon as we take back the House and the Senate, Congress should force the sale of the golden share, turn it back, regulate that. We're not going to be able to undo the acquisition by Japan of a major steel manufacturer in America. Can you imagine if the roles were reversed? Why don't we just sell it to the Chinese? They'll probably pay more. Why don't we just sell all of our strategic operations in America for our national security to the Chinese? They own most of our debt. They own most of our treasury stock, treasury bonds and debt. Why not? They're our major creditor. This doesn't solve the problem. This lets Donald Trump talk about himself as a deal maker and try to take advantage of the people that support him that don't know any better. But now you do. You're here on Legal AF for the breakdown of the golden share. And while it might appear to be gold, it's fool's gold at best. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Let's continue to build this pro-democracy channel together. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.